Fugate, which is President, Senior Consultant of Optimal Safety Solutions. Ian, we are so happy to have you joining us today to provide us valuable information. Thank you for your willingness to present. I'm going to turn the floor over to you, sir.
Thank you, Red. I really appreciate that. Thank you guys for having me. I'm really excited for this. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick. And you get a thumbs up or confirmation all the screen's good. You guys can hear me well?
We can. Yes. Good to go.
Perfect. Thank you. I'd like to start today off a little bit off topic of Scaffold a little bit. I do want to talk about and have a safety moment about the weather that we're experiencing right now. Unlike where Brian's at, where it's nice and sunny and 80 degrees, right now the Pacific Northwest is getting hit with some pretty heavy rain. We're seeing flooding out there. So as a reminder, please allow yourself more time to drive around. Don't drive into puddles or over power lines. Take your time, make sure that you're getting to your destination safely. And another part of the safety moment I wanted to bring up as well is mental health here coming into the holidays. I myself and plenty of other people, I'm sure plenty of people in this space right here have dealt with depression, anxiety, and things like that, especially during the holidays. It could be really geared up. So as you're out there with your teams, be as encouraging as possible, understand them and support them to make sure that they are having the best holiday they possibly can, and do what you can. Your little influences every single day with them may really change their day. So you never know what kind of influence you have. Make sure that you do that. All right, so let's get into scaffolding safety. Today, we're going to really just kind of focus in on some of the things that I've seen in the field myself that are unsafe, and the things that we want to make sure that we're checking for out on the job sites. So as we know, safety, number one priority that we need to make sure that we're doing. When it comes to scaffolding, there's a lot of things that go overlooked because we say, hey, we're going to bring out the scaffold company, they're going to put the scaffold up, and it's going to be done safely, and we can just use it. The problem is that there's a lot of gaps and holes that need to be filled in there. So some special attention needs to go toward training. That's number one, right? We got to have the right proper training that's delivered to the teams that are there, making sure that even the scaffold companies that are coming out there to build it are trained as well. So something you want to look at. Influx of new builders. So scaffold companies do have a high turnover rate. So that's something we want to make sure, hey, these guys are coming in, they look like they're green, or we know that it's a newer crew or a newer company, ensuring that they have that proper training, whether it's user training safety or actual scaffold building safety. Old dogs, same tricks is something I have on here. So a lot of the old dogs, the guys who've been in the industry for a long time, they like to cut little bits of corners and they like to argue their points because they've been doing it for so long. We've all heard that. I've been doing this 20, 30 years. What are you telling me that's different? I want you to take some of this information today and really run with it and ask those questions when they're out on the job site. Hey, are you supposed to tie off like this? Hey, why is this like that? Get curious. I think one of the best qualities of safety professionals is curiosity. The more you ask, the more you know, right? And you can get some answers for you. And we're also going to talk a little bit about manufacturers' recommendations. It's something that I was talking to Steve about before this presentation, making sure that we understand that there are set standards that are separate from OSHA and L&I that these manufacturers have, and sometimes the guys don't follow it. And we'll touch a little bit on that, but one of the biggest things is like tying off to the scaffold. Is it recommended, and does it meet the standard that we need it to meet? Some quick statistics. Roughly about 150 injuries per year is what we see from the scaffold industry, about 45 citations every month. So it's just going to increase over time. Like I was talking about, we got influx of new guys who are coming into the industry. I just spent a couple hours on the phone with some of my buddies in the scaffold industry, and I'm like, man, we're getting all these new guys coming in from the union. We're seeing a shift in change of people who are trying to get into construction, and they see that they're going into scaffold, and we want to make sure that they're getting trained, right? Because we don't want to see this increase of 25-30% of injuries every single year. That could really put a damper on our people that are out there, right? So today we're going to talk a little bit about hazard identification, incident and accident prevention, more of prevention than anything. I don't like being reactive. I like to be as proactive as possible. And we're going to have some QR codes at the end that you'll be able to scan, maybe take a screenshot, or I will provide the PowerPoint presentation for Brian to post and send to everyone here after we're done with this session today. So who am I and why am I qualified to even sit here and talk to you guys? Well, again, my name is Ian Fugate. I've been a journeyman carpenter for 12 years. I worked for L&I out of Region 2 and Region 3 as a compliance officer and a supervisor. And then I moved into DOSH training where I was doing all the onboarding with the team down there in Olympia to ensure that the compliance officers and consultants knew how to do the job and they can identify these hazards out on site and get it corrected. I've also spent some time as a regional safety manager for a couple of different scaffolding companies. I've worked as director of safety and training for some other third-party companies, and currently I own my own company here, Optimal Safety Solutions. So at the end, there'll be a link for all my information. You can reach out to me if you have any questions or request training or even site inspections. If it's specifically for scaffold, I'm more than happy to come out and take a look at it for you. So some different roles and responsibilities. We want to make sure we got some key people identified, right? That we know when these companies come out, they have the right people in place to be able to set up the scaffold. So number one is going to be that qualified person, and that's someone's going to have all that training that they're supposed to. Maybe they have a degree and also the experience to be able to design the scaffold, evaluate it, and then resolve any of the problems. They're going to work with the competent person, who we're going to talk about next, to make sure that the process is going smoothly. They're checking all the boxes and they're making sure that if there is like engineering in place, that the qualified person steps in and makes sure the competent person is doing it. This qualified person doesn't need to be on site, but they can be. They can maybe even double as the competent person that's there. But the competent person needs to be the one for sure that has oversight of the scaffold building process and make sure that everything is getting done right. We have the access letters in the right point. We have danger tape up to block out the area. You have a nice CAS set up, making sure that if we have shrink wrap on there, we have bolts that are going to prevent the uplift. That competent person needs to be there to make sure that this job gets done safely. Unfortunately, I do see a lot is they'll label a competent person. They don't have the training. They don't have the experience that they need to have. They're just checking boxes. We really want to try to press companies that are coming in to build the scaffold to make sure that they're there. And one industry that I definitely see where there's a lack of competent persons is masons, brick masons, guys who are coming out, putting CMU walls up, and they're getting up there. The scaffold doesn't look put together properly, or they're missing guardrails. These guys don't have that kind of training. So we want to make sure that we're getting in there, asking those questions when we see the scaffold go up and say, hey, you know what? This doesn't look right. Who's your competent person? Let's ask those questions. Let's get that experience. Current job site that I'm on right now, there's a lot of people say, hey, this is our competent person. They have the experience, they have the training. And you get out there and you're like, you know what? I don't think this guy is qualified. Let me ask some more questions. And we don't want to get to that point because when they get on the site, you don't have that time, right? We're trying to balance production with safety. You don't have that time. So you don't want to be backtracking. It's something you want to be very upfront with. Scaffold erectors, the people who are building the scaffold, taking it down, they are going to have the most knowledge, for the most part, of what that process is going through at that time, right? So that scaffold builder on top tends to be, one, the competent person, and two, they tend to be the most experienced. The guy right below him on the scaffold, so you have the top guy, and then you got the guy right below him. That's usually a second man. That guy knows probably more than the guy on the top. He's able to predict where the work is going. He's able to call down and say, hey, I need this kind of gear. I need this. We need to prep for this. So he's able to communicate with his top guy so he doesn't have to do as much work. All right, let's get into some violations. So fall protection, number one, right on the scaffold, right? It's one of the most cited things for scaffolding is not having the proper fall protection in place. What does that look like? A lot of the times they're missing guardrails, especially with bricklayers, masons. They don't have enough guardrails in the area. Personal fall arrest systems, anything after 10 feet, we need to make sure that they're tied off somehow, right? And is that supposed to be on the scaffold or is that supposed to be independent? It really kind of depends on the situation. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but there are not too many. Actually, I've been doing some real digging. There's not any scaffold manufacturer that recommends tying off to the scaffold as being a feasible means of fall protection. They really want you to be independent. The QR codes that I have at the end of this, I have two of the largest manufacturers of scaffolding. This is their building instructions. And in there, you'll find out that it says, hey, we cannot say that this is going to hold you. You should not do this. Is a big warning sign. Okay? So independent lifelines are one of my favorite things to use. But what do you get? You get met with excuses. Well, I need to tie off to here. Well, prove to me that it's okay for you to tie off to the scaffold. Don't be scared to ask those questions. They're in your field. You hired them to come there, and you need to feel comfortable asking them, say, hey, I need to know that that's going to hold you if you're going to tie off to it. 9 times out of 10, for a basic scaffold project, that's not going to, the frames or the scaffold structure is not going to be enough to hold them if they do suffer a fall. Platform decks, all the time, see gaps everywhere. Even while we're building the scaffold, there's gaps everywhere while we're trying to build. Things fall, drop in between things, and hit people in the head, get them in the eyes. I've had a couple guys where I go to look up, and then their tool bags get hit, and then it comes dropping down in the pass bay, and it just comes raining down on your face. Okay, so making sure that the planks are always put together, no more than a 1-inch gap in between the planks and any of the structure as well. So if you have a scaffold pole that comes down right here, want to make sure that we're close as we can to get to that. We want to keep that 1 inch there. We could fill in the gaps with plywood. Needs to be at least 3/4 inch plywood's got to be strong enough to hold up. People are like, hey, just a little gap. Well, that little gap of a 1/2 inch, we don't know if it's strong enough. Let's go a little bit bigger there. Improper access to scaffold. I can guarantee if we turn the camera on right now and I ask you guys or raise your hand, how many times have you seen somebody climbing up the frames of the scaffold or the structure, right? Is that okay? No, it's not. I've climbed on bracing over my time. I'll admit to it. I attest to it. I've slipped. I've busted my ass. Excuse my language, but it is what it is, right? It happens, and that's not how it's supposed to be. So we got to have access ladders put up at least every 100 feet. Best thing, got a 100-foot run, just throw that sucker right in the middle there if you have that kind of an access ladder. But there's a lot of other access ladders too that we can build. We can have drop-down planks, so planks that are set up on the scaffold and they have a drop-down ladder. You can go ahead and climb through those. It's one of my favorites. Or you can even build an external ladder that comes off of the scaffold. It's a little bit smaller, but then you can create this platform all the way up that almost spirals, so you're never going to have anything drop down on you. And then the scaffolding, instead of taking a ladder all the way up and having a break at 30, 35 feet, well, now we have a break every 6 feet. And that's something that I could get into on another session or any other kind of training. Scaffold not properly supported. This is something that I have some photos of this. Especially right now, we need to make sure that if the scaffold is set on like a muddy surface or a surface that's going to absorb water, got to pay attention to erosion. We've got a ton of rain right now. So if you have scaffold on your job sites, you have any water runoff coming from the tops of the top of the building, maybe there's a drain pipe that's near the scaffold, we definitely want to make sure that we're checking and inspecting that, right? Scaffolding can't just have the base plates, the screw jacks, can't just sit on the muddy surface. If it's on concrete, we're probably okay. But we really want to see a mud sill underneath of that. And that mud sill is going to help, 1, distribute the weight, and 2, give that extra protection until it doesn't slide around. The wood meeting the contact with rougher surfaces like ground, it's not going to slide as much, okay? So making sure that we have that, make sure you're checking it, check for any cracks. We do not want to set on top of any kind of like bricks. I see this one quite often. I wish I had some photos of it, but people will set bricks up and think that it's strong enough. The problem is they break and then it starts to settle, and then we have scaffold that can possibly collapse. Missing or inadequate guardrails. This is something very common, especially with bricklayers, mason guys. They'll only put 1 cross brace and then they'll start climbing and building. That's not okay. They need to have the railing in there to get rid of those fall zones in that scaffold. So we have an X brace. It leaves this whole area wide open for someone to fall through. And we've all probably heard these stories where someone's standing on the scaffold and they fall backwards. And how did he fall off the scaffold? Well, more than likely there wasn't any rail there to catch them. They have a big X that's up here, the cross brace, but then they fall through that little area on the cross brace. So inadequate. We want to make sure that it's there. If they can't achieve that, make sure that they're wearing some kind of personal fall arrest system, harness, lanyard, and they're hooked up to an area that the competent person and the qualified person have determined that, hey, we can tie off to here. It's good, it's strong, it's going to hold us up. Okay. Scaffold not erected or inspected. Quite a bit. There's no requirement for green tags, but there's a requirement that you go out and you at least visually inspect the scaffold every day. So we are going to cover some inspection techniques and things that I like to go over and things that I really look for when I get on the scaffold, but making sure that it's properly inspected and erected. So number one, having that competent person, the people have the training. Number two, when you go and inspect it, you got to make sure you're looking at all the different components. The scaffolding, it's got so much. It's like Legos for kids, and I absolutely love working with scaffold. Don't get me up about more than 20 feet anymore. I'm not as limber and quick to say, hey, let's go get her done. No. About 20 feet is about my cutoff now. But I do feel a lot safer on a scaffold than I do ladders. Why is that? Because I'm usually the one who builds it, and I know what I'm looking at. So make sure that you identify that person and you're going over there with them and says, hey, I have questions about this. Why does this look like that? Or why is this different here? Get curious, get in there so you understand, hey, this is what it should be. This is how it should be done. And if you don't know, ask. Overloading, incorrect load ratings here. So we have a couple different types of scaffold that, well, it cannot be identified as different load ratings, right? So we have a light, medium, and heavy duty. Light duty scaffold being 25 pounds per square foot, medium being 50, and then heavy duty being 75. Where you see this a lot is they will overload. Back to the bricklayers again. If there's any guys in here who are masons, I'm sorry. Hod carriers, sorry. I'm calling you out. I'm throwing it out there, but this is where I see a lot of faults is in that industry right there. So they'll overstack those areas, and you can see this little AI generated image here on the right-hand side. We have some material that may be sitting there on top of the planks. When you start getting that bow in the planks, especially if it's wood, we're going to have some issues there. So we want to make sure there's not a lot of deflection. I believe it's like a 16th of an inch or 18th of an eighth of an inch. Okay. We want to make sure if we see that going down, we probably need to distribute that load. Where do we distribute it? We want to get over the headers, okay, or the support system of the scaffold. Get away from the center of the scaffolding. It's already going to be heavy if someone's there building. So that person's going to be standing in that one area. You're going to have a bow and deflection. You don't want to overstack that area. Tying off. So OSHA says, hey, you got to have a 4-to-1. So if we're a 5-foot wide scaffold, that 4-to-1, that first tie-in needs to be at 20 feet. Now, there are ways we could build and construct the scaffold to make it a little bit wider on the base so we can get up a bit higher before we have a tie-in point. Or maybe we use that as an outrigger where we could set the scaffold a little bit wider, kick up some tubes, and get it to be a really nice structure. Some structures that we may work on, you might not be able to tie into the building. Specifically in Seattle, there's been some historical buildings that I've done work on. There's only certain areas we could drill in, and it tends to be into the mortar in between bricks. And we don't know how strong that it's going to be. We don't know if it's going to hold up too well. So we want to make that structure a little bit wider so we can say, hey, the scaffold's supported. We're checking 2 boxes. We're securing it to the building, and we're giving it some extra structure so it won't tip out away from the scaffolding. Improper footings, we've kind of already talked about that, so please get out there today. If you do have some scaffold, check those footings, making sure that they're good to go. If you want to send me a photo, my phone number's at the end, we'll attach it. Send me a text, say, hey, how does this look? I have no problem taking that call, that text, and letting you know my opinion about that. Prevention over correction. So being preventative, right? Being ahead of the game. We want to make sure that we're looking at a lot of different things. So you see some photos on here, some of my inspections that I've done over the years. Number one, live load, making sure that the scaffold is not overloaded. And we'll talk about this picture specifically here in the next couple slides of how this was overloaded. It's a very unique instance because it's something that went completely overlooked from the team that actually built the scaffolding out there. Earthly elements, so this is going to be rain right now, high winds. I know in Seattle, a lot of other areas in Washington, shrink wrap or debris nets get up on the scaffold. They're attached to it, so what does that do? It creates a huge sail for that scaffold, and next thing you know, the wind picks up. I know I've been on a few projects in downtown where the wind's picking up and we get a call, we come out there and the scaffold's starting to bounce around. You're like, oh my God, what's going on? How do we fix this, right? And at that point, we should have never even gotten there. At that point, we need to say, hey, how do we make sure this does not happen again? All right. Stable ground and surface underneath. This picture really really gets to me. This went completely overlooked. The general contractor on the site said, hey, no, everything's good. You can't tell too much from this picture, but that end of that trench was about 4.5 feet from that scaffold leg. And they were still planning to keep digging in as close as they could. And I stopped them. I was driving back from Taco Bell and rolled up and said, hey, why is there an excavator next to my scaffold right here? I pulled up and saw this and was like, oh my God, we can't be doing this. All right. That scaffold automatically, in my eyes, is inside the affected zone of that excavation. So there's a couple of different people's issues there. Number one, the excavation contractor should have been calling that out. The competent person says, hey, we got some things that can fall on top of us. Why are we not covering that? Okay. And number two, the GC that actually built this or had the scaffold come in and it was turned over to him, he didn't do any inspections. Actually, I don't even think he was on site, but like once a week. It's pretty bad. All right. So ensuring that ground around it is stable, making sure you get it taken care of. There are ways to, if you have an excavation that comes right up next to the scaffold like this, there's a way to brace the scaffolding so we can distribute the weight across more scaffold frames and not have that weight pressed down against that. And we can even set it up to where you can remove the frame so there's no leg there, so they can continue to dig into the building and have the water tie in. That's what this one was for. Damaged material. See this all the time. I wanted to use one of these other photos that I had of a damaged truss, but it was on a military facility, so I did not want to share that photo with you guys. But for context, this truss was 22 foot long, and in an 8-foot span, it had 6 inches of deflection. So that means the truss was bent 6 inches down from where it actually sat on the ship itself. And I had to argue, kick and scream to get the guys to say, hey, we got to tear this down and put it back with the right material. And I got met with I've been doing this 20 years. I've been doing this and doing that. You got to put your foot down. As we know, as safety professionals, it's hard sometimes, or maybe it's not. Maybe it's really easy. You're right there. Go get it done right now. I don't care what it takes. Yeah, but we also too have to try to work with the teams and say, hey, okay, I understand production, I understand costs. Let's find ways to mitigate this in a happy medium. If you're not having those conversations, it's going to make your life a lot harder. But right here, we have something just describing the photo. This is a scaffold leg for a system scaffold that comes down. It's sitting on what we call an extension jack. The extension jack is not made for a base jack. Okay? Base jacks have a square plate on the bottom and then either a screw extension or they're able to come up through the tube. This one is made to sit on top of that. Mainly, these would be used for rolling tower scaffolds. It would sit down on top of a caster and you would adjust the height to where it needs to be, and then you're good to go. But that's not the application it was used for, and it was damaged. So when you don't take action, things happen, right? 2 o'clock in the morning, I got a phone call. We've got really high winds on one of our boats, and it's the scaffold starting to damage the boat itself. The client's getting a little upset. I pull up on site, and this is what I see. And scaffold had gotten picked up, torn up, thrown around. It's missing pins. They actually used a gravity pin, so just a lock that goes in between the 2 scaffold frames like this. They had them in there, but the plastic was beating against it and knocked some of them out as well. So if we know that we have weather coming up, we need to address it quickly. We need to scan through our jobs and say, hey, I got scaffolding here. I've got this here. This type of stuff can happen. We want to put eyes on it early and often. Okay? As you can see pretty quickly here, it doesn't matter how strong this scaffold is, how heavy it is. That sail picked it up, and then in the photo on the right, tweaked the frame so much that the planks were falling off of it. And this was one of the nicer photos. There's some stuff on the other side that was really bad. So we're going to come back to that photo from earlier. Scaffolding on the left, it's the same scaffold, okay, different angle, but the scaffolding on the left was set up. And if you notice, there's some danger tape on there. They actually removed my red tag, which I was a little perturbed about. But there was no attachment to the structure. And if you look at the photo and you look in the top left of that photo, it's cantilevered over. So they should have had some kind of counterbalance coming back. And I recommended to my team I was working for this company and said, hey, let's get some eco blocks set back over to the right. Let's cable down and get some extra support on there. There's nothing holding us up. Or maybe we put some support up and underneath on like a shoring situation and get it so it doesn't tip over. They said, no, they're only up there doing a little bit of welding. They'll be okay, yada, yada, blah, blah, blah. And then I run into issues with the general manager. We've all had those types of fun conversations. A month later, we get a call. There's an accident. They thought it was the scissor lift or the boom lift that had struck one of the sandblasting hoses that came down, pulled it, and yanked the scaffold down. That was not the case. In this instance, the scaffolding there was some scaffolding above this scaffold hanging off the side of the boat that we were working on, and the sandblast had trickled down along the side of the ship itself and funneled itself into the top platform of this scaffolding and ended up overloading it. And as you can see on the far right hand side, there was sandblast everywhere on the ground afterwards. So it tipped it over. Luckily, nobody was there. Or at least on the scaffold. There was some crews that were in there, had working. Photo on the left shows kind of where the boom lifts were at and where they were actually moving around quite a bit. They never really moved from that area. But it was something that went overlooked. And in our pre-task plans, we have to identify all these hazards. This is something that after 20 years of building scaffold, these guys just didn't recognize it. They didn't see it. So we don't know everything. Competent person, qualified person, it doesn't matter who it is. They don't know everything. But if you work together, have a good pre-task plan, you talk about the possibility of these different things, you can weigh that risk and say, hey, we need to make sure we're doing these things. Okay. This one pretty much was, they didn't want to listen. And I no longer work there anymore. So, hey. Fall protection, we'll just touch on it really quick, making sure that they have fall protection at that 10-foot level. That's where their feet are standing. If you need some kind of a reference guide, scaffolding frames, so just frame scaffolds, the main structure of the scaffold, the ones that are not the base, but the ones that are going up, they're about 6'3" to 6'6", depending on the manufacturer themselves. I think Bill Jacks is 6'4", as well as Safeway scaffolding is 6'4". So you can get a kind of an idea. If they're up 2 frames, do the quick math, they're over 10 feet. They're 6 foot, 13 foot up, or 12, 13 feet up. Okay. Right around that point is when we need to start also with most scaffolding is about 36 to 42 inches wide. We need to be thinking about tying in at that 12 to 13 foot mark right there as well. Personal fall arrest systems, I really am. Oh, there it goes. We good? Okay.
Yeah, we're good, Ian.
Perfect. Where's that? Sliding back here. Independent of the scaffold. I forgot already. Okay. If they are going to tie off to the scaffold, excuse me. If they are going to tie off to the scaffold, we want to make sure that an engineer says that it's okay somewhere, some way. Okay. But if you don't have that, we're going to go to the qualified person and the competent person's opinion on it. Scaffolding setup that is not tied to the structure yet, they shall not be using that as a anchor point. So they get up a couple frames and they're still tied off to the scaffold or to, let's say, system scaffold poles. They're tied off to that and they're walking around their building. They can't do that. You're not supposed to do that at all. Because people will ask, well, I'm tied off to the scaffold, but if I fall off, I'm 6 foot tall and my harness is going to release, I'm still going to hit the ground. Well, if you have a vertical lifeline, you're tied up above your head, the likelihood of you hitting the ground is a lot less. But if you tie off to the scaffold, it's definitely going to be a lot lower. And the likelihood of it falling on top of you is greater. Okay? So independent lifelines, plenty of fall protection equipment that is out there that they could use. They're going to say, hey, I don't have this, I don't have that. Well, go get it. Home Depot is right around the corner. There's a builder's first source, whatever you need, go get that. There's different options out there. You have window jacks that we can get into fall protection about all these different pieces of equipment that they can get anchor points. They're there. They exist. Don't let them give you too many excuses. Scaffolding inspection procedures, just some things that I like to take out when I go out and do scaffold inspections. So I start from the ground up. I don't always look up. I mean, I'll look up when I walk to it to make sure I'm not walking underneath of anybody. But when I start on the bottom. And the reason being is because if you don't have a stable surface, the entire scaffold is compromised at that point. So making sure it's firm, You've got weight distribution if it's a little bit muddy. If we're set on top of I-beams, which is something we do commonly, making sure that it's secured, not sliding around, because the metal plates and the screw jacks or the plates that they put on it to hug that steel beam, it could still slide around. So we want to get some clamps on there. Just a simple C-clamp could hold that in place. That's totally fine, but we want to make sure that that's there. I'm looking for the cross braces. When you look at a scaffold, especially in this picture, I know it's got some different colors here, but each scaffold in between each upright is called a scaffold bay. And we don't want to have more than 2 bays of scaffold without a cross brace. When it's more than 2 bays, we have a problem. That means we have a dead leg, and then it could shift and float around. And that's going to make the scaffold tip over one in either direction, and that's a big problem, right? If that one buckles and the scaffold frames buckle in, that area of that scaffold could collapse. Okay, if there's not too many things that are going to hold that in place. As we work our way up the scaffold, I'm looking for guardrails. I'm looking for planks to make sure that it's fully planked all the way around. If it needs toe boards, because we have an area where there's a lot of people walking around or underneath the scaffold, ensuring that those toe boards are up. Access is provided. You can use an extension ladder, make sure it's 3 feet past that platform, and hopefully a swing gate that's there to prevent them from falling off as they enter and exit that scaffolding. And a little bit higher up, making sure that we're not overloading the scaffold again. Uplift is prevented, so some kind of a bolt system if you have debris nets or shrink wrap in there, and making sure that the guys who are building the scaffold are using some kind of fall protection system. So we're looking for specifically erosion, soft soils, any frost. So as we get deeper into the winter, it's going to get a little bit colder. And then right after that, we get some warm temperatures rolling into the spring. That's an area that gets missed quite a bit. So if you have scaffold sitting on your site for a period of time, definitely something you want to go check out. Make sure that it's good to go every single day. Again, back to no bricks, no unstable materials. We want to make sure that the stuff that's underneath of it is secure and strong enough to be able to hold it. Base plates, mud sills need to be under there as well. Leveling jacks. When you look at screw jacks, they tend to be about 24 inches long. In there at 18 inches, there's a notch. That notch is to prevent the erector from pulling that thing up too high, and then it's not stable anymore. So if it was a tip, it could pop off of that scaffold screw jack. We don't want that. All right. Ensures plumb level and square. I'd say 95% of the companies that are going to come out, build the scaffold for you, your big box contractors, your Safeway, your brand Safeway, PCI, Sunbelt, these guys, they know what they're doing. Make sure it's done right. They know what they're looking at when they get out there, and most of the time it is done properly. Where I see some of those faults is from subcontractors, and we're going to talk about common fail points here in a second. I know we got about 10 minutes on the clock, so we're going to keep going here. Vertical posts, okay? So all the framework, making sure it's in place. You see any bends or sways in that scaffold, you're going to definitely want to check that out, all right? And also when you look down the scaffold run, it should be pretty damn straight all the way down. Now, if you have some pop-outs in the building, obviously it's going to be there. But if you have a straight run of scaffold, you should be able to look down it with the eye and say, you know what, everything's in place. If you have some frames that are starting to lean out at the top, scaffold's not level, and we need to address that as soon as we can, right? And maybe that comes from the compression tie was pushed in and the scaffold's leaning. Maybe something happened where the frame got lifted up and is now sitting on top of the scaffold frame and not connected, not coupled. That happens quite a bit. I've experienced that where I had a scissor lift, somebody's working on a scissor lift below me and ended up catching the end of a scaffold brace and lifting up the scaffold while I was standing on it. And I was like, hey, why is the scaffold? This is not supposed to happen. Looking around, look down, well, there's a guy lifting it up, okay? So checking out for that kind of stuff while you're up there. Cross braces, we talked about it. No more than 2 bays need to be separated from a cross brace. We want to make sure it's there. That cross brace is the structure. Okay, the rails don't really do much except provide fall protection for the people who are working on the scaffold and maybe to keep something squared up in the backside. But the real structural part of that is the cross braces. And we want to make sure that, number one, they're not bent out of shape. You'll see a cross like this, and then the bottom leg is like bent over like at a 90-degree, and they're still using it. I'm like, hey, that's not how that's supposed to work, right? We're supposed to have good, clean material, undamaged. It gets up there. Really good competent persons, really good erectors will say, no, that needs to go back down. I can't tell you how many times over my career where stuff will come up and I'll look at it and be like, nope, send it back. And that's the attitude that they need to carry. Platforms, they need to be scaffold grade planks. Steve, we've had these conversations before. What is a scaffold grade plank? Or you see the OSHA approved stamp on there, and that's not a thing, okay? We need to be able to make sure that that scaffolding plank, whatever kind of wood or material that it is, that it's going to support the load that it's intended for. So if it's a light duty scaffold, it has to be able to support that 25 pounds per square foot. At that point, maybe a shorter scaffold bay with a 2x10, maybe that does work for that. But if we start getting into wider scaffold bays, 7 and 10 foot wide, and now we're putting these same 2x10s there, that might not work, right? Scaffold plank, true scaffold plank, is laminated. So you'll have different layers of it. They're pressed on top of each other, compressed down, and then this makes our scaffold plank. So if it cracks, okay, or we have some flexibility in there. So if some of it does get knocked around and broken, we're able to identify hopefully sooner than later. How do we look for those different types of things that are inside because it's layered? We knock on it. Okay, so good guys will knock on it and be like, okay, this sounds a little more hollow. It sounds like something's there. Maybe they give it a flex when it's going up. Those are the things that those qualified people and the competent persons should be looking for before it goes up. I know wood plank is not a big thing here in Washington State, but we want to be looking for those cracks that might be in there as well. Typical guardrail, making sure that you have some kind of a top rail on there. That top rail needs to be at about 38 to 45 inches above that platform. Mid rail installed at 21 inches from there. Toe boards, if anything can fall off in anybody, you have entrance and exits to the building, making sure that that's toe boarded out. You could even build some scaffold out to give a canopy to give better protection for people who might be going in there, similar to what we would use for like a pedestrian canopy. Ladder access, making sure that you have it up, it's secured. I have a couple photos here and some other slides, and we'll bang through it real quick. Making sure that it's complete, all right? And then they need to break, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's 30 feet. That they need to have a break in scaffold in that access ladder to the top, because we don't want people climbing 60, 70 feet up on the same ladder run. We need to have some kind of a break there. Even if that break comes off into the scaffold and you walk over one bay and you climb up, there needs to be somewhere, some kind of access that they can break off and get onto a secure platform. Ties, guys, bracing for the structure has to be there, right? And we can, like I said, we can make the scaffold a little bit wider to maybe help give it support if you can't tie to the structure in a certain area. Definitely something a qualified person, a competent person needs to identify and call out first, heavy and often. Low capacity, we've already touched on that a little bit. Weather, again, this is such a big deal. I know everyone in this room has probably seen a video on LinkedIn or on TikTok or something. The scaffold's blowing and then you've got all the shrink wrap going everywhere and you're like, oh my God, it's going to fall. And it does. Okay. Right now is that time of season. We have to really be vigilant about getting out there and making sure that that stuff is done. When you have a scaffold gets put up, walk through, check with the guys. Too many people don't walk the scaffold with the erector, with the competent person and the foreman. They just say, okay, everything's good. All right, great. And they walk away. Like, wait, where'd you go? You need to come back. You need to go over there and say, hey, okay, where's my access points? Can we climb the scaffold? Make sure everything's good, right? Make sure you're having those conversations. All right, let's get into subcontractor fails, okay? Well, fails. L&I doesn't like the word failed, right? But it is a failure, right? And these things need to be identified. This is the most common things that I see out there. Subcontractors, number one, a lot of them are not trained on scaffold user awareness. That is a very critical thing that they need to be doing. Getting that awareness to say, hey, I can be on the scaffold. I need to use it this way. I cannot use it this way, right? I can't remove the guardrails. God, I could ask for hand raise right now. If you can click it right now, let's see how many hand raises we get. How many times have you seen subcontractors remove guardrails because they have to put material up there or the pieces in their way because they're working on a window, right? There's already a couple right there showing up. So making sure that they're doing that. Another one, tie-ins, right? You get the sheet metal guys or somebody who's coming in and, oh, the scaffold ties in the way. Click, click, click. They unclamp it, fill in their gap, fill in their work, and then they don't put the tie back. Well, that's not supposed to happen. Right? So ensuring that that training is done. If those things do happen, pre-planning, let's say they're taking out the tie, hey, we got to get this tie out. We got to get this thing in here and filled. Right. Work with the scaffold team. They'll open it up for you. You can get your tie or your fill in, get in your finished product, and then the scaffold team can continue to tear down. And don't let people just get out there. I've had plenty of times where I walk out and I'm like, where'd all my ties go? Well, they're attached to the frame, but they're not to the structure. Okay, who moved it? That guy or that guy. They start pointing fingers, right? We don't want to have that. Trades, they don't inspect the scaffold often, like ever. Most of the time, they usually just walk up, say, hey, it's good to go. We don't want that either. So they also climb the scaffold components, and they just, like I said, they assume that it's safe and that it's good to go. That doesn't mean that the erectors are not at fault too. They tie off to the scaffold, number one, and they climb the scaffold components. Now, this is approved by certain manufacturers. Safeway says you can climb the couplings, right? As long as you're tied off, you're allowed to climb those types of scaffolds. Like, well, okay, that's cool. But a lot of manufacturers won't. So when we get to the end of this, make sure you screenshot that, get the QR code. So if you do have those types of scaffold out there, you know if they're allowed to do that. Erectors tend to miss plank, right? They don't put enough up there. They don't put enough plywood up in that area. Okay, so we want to make sure that that's put on. And then the same thing that goes for uplift. They're not putting pins inside. Process and setup, making sure if you are building a scaffold or dismantling the scaffold, there is a CAS set up. We don't want people in that area and own that area. Tell your guys, hey, they need you. This is where you're building. Don't let anybody in, right? Get the signage up, get the danger tape up, make sure no one comes in there. I can tell you how many times some piece of scaffold will come down and hit somebody that's not even involved with the scaffolding job, or it'll come down and then it'll lean over and fall on top of somebody. I've had people drop stuff on top of me, shattered my forearm, whoop-de-doo, out for 6 months, and then couldn't build again the same after that. Quick little photos here. Number one, plank, not complete, right? It's not set up. We're missing some guardrails from there. Definitely, this is a smaller time contractor. This guy told me exact words. I've been building scaffold 26 years, and I've never had an issue. Okay. And he was the one doing not only the scaffold, but the plaster on this project. So it just told me like that. Is this guy really competent? Nah, I don't think he is. Photo number two, we got an access ladder that started off great, but then they jumped to a different thing. I was like, what are you guys doing here? Well, it just wasn't in the right place, so we gave them a different option. No, that different option doesn't work. It needs to be continuous access, so we can't have things like this floating around. Number three, classic subcontractor moves here. Hey, your scaffold leg is in my way. Okay, well, how are you going to fix that? We're supposed to come out and do it. No, they took matters into their own hands. For context, that is a 4x4 that is about 7 foot tall, and the screw jack that's on there is actually a swivel jack. So this swivel jack moves side to side, and there's no support brace here. And then that 4x4 goes straight into the mud. Not a good day. Photo number four, guardrails are missing. Why? Because they had to crane up or boom up some stuff for the forklift. They removed the guardrail to get their tie off or to be able to load the material. Drywall is a common one. They got to put them back, right? And they also need to be in fall protection in there as well. All right. So we got some tips on here. If you have that time, let's screenshot these. Like I said, I will provide the PowerPoint for download to Brian here after this meeting, so take a look out for that. And if you would like it directly from me, I have no problem sharing this. I built this specifically for this summit meeting here, so it's all for you guys. A couple quick links to some of the things that I think, some of the literature that's out there that I think would be very beneficial for everyone that is here. Well, with that, damn, 10 o'clock. I think I've been doing this a while, guys. I really appreciate the time. If you have any questions, let's drop them in the chat. I'll hang out for a bit here with Rhett and the guys. If you want to stop in, ask some questions. If not, I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much for having me. My contact information is here, and let me know if you need anything else, and happy holidays.
Boy, that was a fantastic presentation. Thank you so much, Ian, for taking
Thank you,
the
Rhett.
time and for sharing your information with the group. I do have a couple questions for you with regard to your experience and expertise with the subject matter. Many of the wood planks that I see around the community here in the Pacific Northwest, I will oftentimes see duplex style nails being used to pin the planks or decking. And I've always thought that to be a safety hazard or a tripping hazard. But some of these notorious scaffold builders will oftentimes use duplex style nails, which are protruding out a quarter to a half inch from the deck platform. And with a large area scaffold, boy, you could imagine there are probably hundreds, if not thousands, of these nails that to me seem like tripping hazards. When I talk to their qualified person, many of them say, well, this is how we've done it for years and we've never had an issue before. Can you speak to anything on that subject, please?
For sure, yeah, especially large area scaffold. So for context, for people who don't know what large area scaffold is, scaffolding that's built up and then has one large platform that's out there. Usually it's staggered planks so they can lay plywood nice and flat on there. We can put up ladders. It's usually built for, or maybe some, we have a big rotunda and we need to catch all sides of it. We can even build it to where it could have rolling towers on there. And with that nail sticking up, that does become a hazard. Hazard, and then if there's other scaffolds on top of that, definitely it is a hazard. And that's something that there's not necessarily a regulation or a standard behind it, but in a PTP or JHA, you could call that out. Says, hey, this is a tripping hazard, so how are you guys going to mitigate that for me? And it could be as simple thing as, no, you're going to get the same size 16 penny nail, it just won't be duplex, right? And we want to make sure it has a flat head on there, because not only does it create a tripping hazard or something for like a rolling tower that's on there, dragging lines or electrical across the scaffold plank and it catches that, it could rip open your cords, it can cause electrical shock, all sorts of things. So best practice would be to use head nail and not the duplex. Now, if the duplex is on there for maybe on the front of the toe board, yes, but if it's on that walking working surface, definitely want to have that removed.
Great, and that's what we've utilized in the past, a flathead 16 penny or a wood screw, which might be optimal for them removing and reusing. I also have one additional question with regard to footings and sills or base plates. I oftentimes see instead of 4 nails, which you typically see on a tube and coupler, I'll see 2 nails that are spaced kitty corner that are curled over adjacent from each other to secure that mud sill. I still am in question as to whether or not that is legal and accepted. I believe that it is industry practice because that's what I typically see 95% of the time. Can you speak to that, please?
Yeah, no worries. Another one, there's no real standard for it. The manufacturer does call out most of the time that a minimum of 2 nails needs to be in there. So if you look at a base plate, any of those plates, especially the screw jacks, they'll have the 4 bigger ones that can be 4 lag bolts because we can do shoring, so we need to put it on top of something else. The lags can fit in, but the nails usually are just catty corner to each other, as long as it's there to prevent shifting. So if it's sitting maybe at an angle, let's say you have one of those swivel jacks. If it's sitting at an angle, we definitely want to have 4 in there so it does not slide. But if it's on a flat surface, really it's there just so it doesn't get displaced.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Excellent.
Of course.
Other questions for Ian? Other questions? Anybody out there? I see some hands up. Go ahead and speak up, folks, if you have your hands up. Just unmute your microphone and say who you are, and let's hear that question.
I got a question. Good job, Ian.
Thank you.
So in the past, we've struggled getting toe boards on the scaffolds, mainly because it wasn't bought out when they hired when they're renting the scaffold, and the scaffold erectors would be glad to put them on for you, but it's at a cost. I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts about that. I also see netting on a lot of the scaffolds now, and so I don't know if that's included in the cost or is that an add-on.
When I've done my estimates before, I've done a little bit of everything. Yeah, it's toe boards and everything had to come in because it's not required on every project. So it is an extra expense for the toe boards. My advice to that one would be, if you don't have a requirement for the entire site, let's identify those critical areas that may need it. Okay, so if you have like a break room that's off to the side where people are going to constantly be moving in and out, or maybe up in front of the job site where people pull in and there's a lot of parking and things like that, definitely want to identify those areas and try to get it up. You could also do it yourself. I would highly recommend getting some at least 1/2 inch, maybe even 1 inch 1x6s, and you can go on the front of the scaffold, and you wouldn't really be altering the scaffold here. You just put it down in front of if it's a wood plank, you can press it on there and nail it to the planks itself so it doesn't move around. So maybe you save your costs in that, because I know that you start hiring these guys, you're looking at $120 an hour per guy that's out there for a union contractor, and that cost adds up if they're out there just putting on toe boards. Like, why is it $20,000? Well, because I got all these guys out here. So it's something that you can handle yourself if you feel comfortable with that. Netting usually suffices for making sure the material doesn't fall off, but it's totally, as a customer, it's your decision of where you want that protection to be there. So did that answer that question for you?
Well, it's a bigger discussion. And as an industry, it always becomes, it's really cost. And what happens is the scaffold guys go away, and then we're working underneath. We got people walking in and out of trailers, in and out of doors, and we're never covered. You can put red tape up, but that doesn't work either. So I wish it was part of the cost, and we could, somehow get that into the bid. But anyhow,
Yeah,
thank you. I got
definitely
it.
request it. Throw it out there. Try to work with them. I know some of these estimators out there. They'll try to do as best as they can, but they are getting pulled from the higher ups saying, "Hey, it's material going out. We got to charge for it." So, but if you have questions for that, coming down the road, pre-planning for a project, feel free to reach out. I'll be more than happy to help you out.
Thanks.
Other questions?